Good evening and welcome to another round of Over the Alps. We're going to start a new game and trying to go for some achievements. You can see that I am tracking some at the bottom using the Steam overlay. And we're going to the second scenario, King of the Mountain. Actually, I did that wrong, I guess. Didn't I? How do I start a new... I guess I just overwrite. Yeah. Actually, let me remove that pin. I'm not a fan. Switzerland closes borders to refugees. Under pressure from Germany, Switzerland will no longer offer sanctuary to refugees without a visa. Since 1933, the small Alpine country has taken in thousands of political refugees, so those seeking asylum due to their race or religion were turned away. Today, all refugees at the Swiss border are being told that the lifeboat is full. Also, this decision is sure to meet with strong criticism. Switzerland has taken in more refugees from Germany than any other European nation. Thanks for the update on the food intake. I'm glad the dog is happy now. And in this game we are playing the spy Annie. And we're writing to our contact in the British agency. Dearest Aubrey, I hope you know what you're doing. First of all, this unfathomable business with the postcards. I was performing wonders in Paris, you know. I had the German ambassador wrapped around my little finger. Now I'm gone, I dread to think who will swoop in. The Russians, perhaps. By all accounts, their agents were circling him like vultures before I arrived. I have no great desire to spend any more time in his company, mind you. Awful man. No chin, no imagination. A few evenings with him was enough to convince me of one thing. Hold that thought. Here I am at the Swiss border. Goodbye, France. At least Bern is, by all accounts, a relatively civilized city. Act 1. A trail of banknotes. Switzerland so far, Aubrey. Quite hilly, quite chilly. I'd hoped to take more time to appreciate the landscape, but Control has given me a reading assignment. It's presumably vital to my upcoming mission. I just wish I knew why. I'm a spy, Aubrey, not a schoolgirl. As far as I could tell from the first few pages, it was a lot of nonsense about the Grand Prix, racing tactics, teams, scandals, etc. I'm unlikely to need it. So I had a spirited conversation with a fellow passenger. A small, anxious Frenchman by the name of Blaise. I was concerned that the situation in Europe would impact his mustard-making business. I assured him he was overthinking it. I'm no fan of Chamberlain, but if there is a benefit to appeasement, is that it reduces the likelihood of a world war, even if it does give Hitler free rein to terrorize the Czechoslovakias of the world. Blaise looked taken aback. The thought of another world war hadn't even entered his head. He was mostly worried about tariffs. In German it's called Bild, but I shall be patriotically referring to it by its French name, Bien. It sounds like the French word for good, does it not? An excellent omen, I hope. We are pulling into the station now. Apparently I'm to meet my handler in a barber shop near the town square. I love this cloak and dagger stuff, Aubrey. There's even a password, though personally I was hoping for a secret knock. Here we are, a mustache. So I know that when I click on the car, I will notice that I'm being followed. I'm not sure I want to do that, but I guess I want to do that. How's this for some proper espionage, Aubrey? I was on my way to meet my handler when I realized there was someone on my tail. A sleek black car, pulled up in a quiet side street. Inside, I snatched a glimpse of a pair of glittering eyes following my every move. I'd been compromised before I even reached Bern. My stop in Bienne should have been a closely guarded secret. If I were you, Aubrey, I'd be worried. Once upon a time, you told me that Control didn't run a leaky boat. I marched straight up to the car. No point dragging these things out. I half expected some jackbooted thug, but the car's occupant was a woman with perfect blonde hair, a smile like porcelain. Yen is a town of 2 languages. I made my best guess. I spoke to her in German. Contrary to popular conception, it doesn't have to be a hard language. It can be spoken with remarkable delicacy. And who might you be? My name is Fräulein Wolf. Her smile broadened. And you are? She looked pleased to be speaking German, but it wasn't Swiss German. She sounded like she was from Berlin. None of your business, actually. Her eyebrows raised. A shame! I thought we were getting somewhere. She drove away, leaving me alone by the roadside. Okay, time for the barber. A bell jangled merrily above the door. It was a Friday afternoon, but the barber shop was empty and silent. A man sat behind the counter, smoking and looking out of the window. "We're closed," he said brusquely, a French accent. I was woken this morning by Swan song. My handler carefully closed the shutters. They sing for the last days of summer. I read the dossier most thoroughly, but I'd like a refresher. The Frenchman shot me a look laced with suspicion, but I think I got away with it. Operation Swansong, he muttered. So many code names in our line of work, Aubrey. Usually a compound noun for some reason. He took me through the burn operation in detail. Apparently, Kurt Fischer, one of the top-ranked stars of the German Grand Prix racing team, is a close personal friend of Adolf Hitler. It seems even fascist dictators have life outside their job. I wish the same could be said for me. Fischer has a bit of a reputation, you see. He sounds quite fun. But we wouldn't be hearing about him if he wasn't also catastrophically bad at poker. Predictably, he's found himself neck deep in debt. To pay his debt, he's been embezzling from the Motor Association itself. If the Germans discovered this, he'd be ruined. We wouldn't want that, would we? Not when he could prove so very useful to us, so we're going to blackmail him, offer to pay off his debts and turn him into an asset. My handler sat back and stepped out a cigarette. Here, he placed a brown leather briefcase in front of me. Its bronze clasp was engraved with the image of an old-fashioned galleon, sails to the wind. I unclasped it and gasped. Banknotes, Aubrey, stacks and stacks of them. 100,000 Swiss francs, he said. Enough to pay off all of Fisher's debts. And enough to buy a couple of nice Alpine chalets, Aubrey. The Frenchman's glare could have stripped paint. To be used with discretion. I want most of it back, if possible. A fortune. Control really wants Fisher in his pocket. I took the briefcase. It had a satisfying weight to it. We've been in talks with Fisher for months, said the Frenchman. Until now, he's only been toying with the idea of treason, but we think he's finally ready to flip. I decided not to mention Fräulein Wolf. Trust no one, after all. You taught me that. Hoping to throw my new friend off the tail, I caught the bus. Darling Aubrey, I dearly hope I was able to throw off my pursuer. But I know I haven't. I'd seen a familiar look in Wolf's eyes. She's not a woman who gives up easily. I stopped for a quick drink on the way to the hotel, of course. I asked for Le Soissons Queens, but they hadn't heard of it, so I settled for a glass of wine. I half expected the Fräulein to walk through the door, but I was untroubled. Listening to the burble of conversation around me, it seemed the Grand Prix was a topic on everyone's lips. I asked the barman who he'd be placing money on. The smart money was on a quiet, reliable German driver named Ruprecht Chamiso. But Kurt Fischer has also had a chance. He has a specialty, uphill driving. They call him Bear King, said my barman, king of the mountain. I tipped the barman for his trouble, downed my glass and headed to my hotel in the old city. Kornhausplatz. I had arrived at the Schweizer Bär, the same hotel that our friend Kurt Fischer was staying in for Sunday's Grand Prix. Even better, my handler had booked me into the room next to his. That evening I contrived to bump into Fischer at the hotel bar. Going by his reputation, I judged that he was not a man to resist a hotel bar. I was right, of course. He burst into the bar like a hurricane, laughing, joking, clapping people on the back. When he spotted me, he drifted over like a moth to flame. He was shockingly handsome, Aubrey. It really took my breath away for a moment. And what would the lady like to drink? A French 75 if they know how to make it. Oh, I'm sure they do. Fischer dazzled me with a grin. The man had teeth like piano keys. That drink was followed by another and another. I think I drank a little too much, Aubrey. Before I knew it, Fisher and I were the best of friends. My memory of the rest of the night is, I confess, spotty. We had a lengthy, jovial, perfectly inane conversation. Our laughter drowned out everyone else in the bar. After a while, I practically dragged Fisher back to my hotel room. And I got my achievement! Annie mixes business with pleasure. After a while, I practically dragged Fisher back to my hotel room. I'll spare the details, Aubrey. I can't imagine your face right now. I admit it wasn't the wisest move of my career. He was absent when I woke up. On my pillow, he'd left a formal invitation to the pre-Grand Prix party. Apparently, it was due to take place on a yacht on a nearby lake, the Wohlensee. I may have missed my first chance to flip him to our side, but it seems I'd have another. In the cold light of the Swiss sun, last night's subterfuge seems like a surreal dream, but the evening is almost here and it's time to go. Wish me luck. Alright, let's have a look at my achievements. Okay, completing. Good showing at the Grand Prix. Drinking contest. Using no money of the briefcase. Getting a cold. Alright, and the search got deleted. Alright. I arrived at the dogs. My dearest Aubrey, when evening came, I boarded with the rest of the guests. The whole day was black as licorice. As the yacht launched, a great cheer went up. A bottle of champagne was popped, a band played the Swiss anthem. Newspaper. Bern prepares for Grand Prix. Switzerland's capital is gripped with tension today as it anticipates the Grand Prix race occurring this weekend. The racers will be competing on the Bremgarten circuit, and thousands of motor enthusiasts have arrived in the city to witness the event. The track is notorious as one of the most dangerous in Europe, particularly in the rain, with deadly twists and turns that catch even experienced drivers off guard. Fireworks! The champagne bubbled, the wine flowed. I'm not sure what verb is appropriate for the fondue. Glooped? The party was a whirl of unfamiliar faces. I couldn't spot Fisher among them. I suspected I might find him at the bar. No dice. I bought a drink and returned to the deck, where I was accosted by an Italian race car driver in a state of some excitement. He grabbed at my hands, shouting and encouraging me to dance. He told me his name was Cornelio and he'd make my dreams come true. I somehow doubted it. We danced for a while. Eventually he forgot about me and staggered off, searching for more wine. That's when I saw her. What involved? She was here, smiling, simpering, chatting to a chiseled young man with the look of a race car driver. She flashed me a look. Our eyes met. Her smile widened. I curled my mouth into a smile that was equally barbed. As I neared, the Fräulein affected the look of wide-eyed innocence, like a doe that was about to meet its violent end. The man next to her shifted uncomfortably. Fräulein Wolf, so wonderful to see you again. She smiled and placed her hand on the shoulder of the tall man next to her. May I introduce you to Timothy Sidhurst, the greatest English race car driver? Of course. He now races for the German team. We just make better cars, you see. I had no time for her games, Aubrey. I made my excuses and stormed off. I never thought I would be so glad to see Kurt Fischer's face in a crowd. He was deep in conversation with another driver, boasting, of course. I have no use for helmets, he was proclaiming proudly. My German skull is tough enough on its own. And as for these? At this point, Aubrey, he pulled off a pair of goggles from his breast pocket. Useless things. They won't save a man if the road decides his time has come. I missed you this morning, mein Liebling. Fischer turned, a devilish grin on his face. Annie, I was wondering when you would show up. He ushered his drinking companion away. I finally told him why I'd come to Bern, to recruit him. I didn't seem surprised by my offer. I'd been expecting a British agent at some point, and after last night he'd probably put two and two together. Spying on Herr Hitler is a dangerous pastime, said Fischer. Maybe if you gave me the cash to pay off my debts? This will cover it. I handed over the briefcase. He opened it just enough for a peek. A grin crossed his face. Oh, indeed I will. Now uphold your end of the agreement. Fischer smiled. Don't worry, I'll be your man on the inside. And when we get back to the hotel, I'll give you the document. For the rest of the evening, I decided to enjoy his company. Evening danced away into the night. We had a jolly old time. The boat returned to dock, and the two of us ended up stumbling back to the hotel together. Two Polizei loomed out of the shadows like a pair of tombstones. We've been told a young lady of your description was trespassing at the Grand Prix party. Is this true? With a little help from Fischer, I persuaded them that I'd attended the party legitimately. That was a close one, Aubrey. It seems Wolf isn't above using the Swiss police to do her dirty work. I walked with Fischer to Kornhausplatz. Can we please walk? Okay. We stumbled into Fischer's hotel room together, laughing uproariously. Fischer had the broadest grin I'd ever seen. He swept me up in his arms. We spent the night together, celebrating the fact we'd reached an agreement. Neither of us were tired, Aubrey. We talked and talked. At first we spoke about solemn matters of the soul. Who we are, who we wanted to be. I spoke about my childhood in Cornwall and my later travels in Africa. Fisher confessed he couldn't imagine doing anything else. Behind the wheel, he was a king. He'd rather die on the track than spend his life away from it. After that, Aubrey, things went in a predictable direction. As we lay in bed together the next morning, Fisher lit a cigarette. "We need to talk," he said seriously. Something in his tone made me sit up and pay attention. You weren't the only foreign agent I was speaking to. I was running something of a con, to tell the truth. I listened to his explanation, my heart hammering in my ears. Apparently he'd been selling his secrets not just to us, Aubrey, but also to the Russians. Seeing my expression, I spoke quickly. "But now I only have eyes for you, Annie. Take me back to London with you." He opened a safe and retrieved a manila folder. "It's all here, in a cipher. Only I know the key. I can tell you when we're in England." There we go. I told him it wouldn't be that easy. The Prime Minister was trying to appease Hitler, not to antagonize him. Fisher was sweating copiously. "There must be another way," he said. "Please, Annie." I wish I could have said more, but our time had run out. Wolf burst into the hotel room, waving a Mauser pistol. Fisher shouted a dozen German expletives, tripping over a chair in his desperate attempt to put myself between him and the Fräulein. "Jealous, Fräulein?" "Don't move," she snarled. I heard every word. "Give me the file." I do believe she'd broken into my room next door, Aubrey, and had been listening at the wall. Fisher handed her the papers instantly, not a word of protest. Sudden visions of my childhood flashed before my eyes. Never a good sign, Aubrey. She leveled her pistol at Fisher. "Back home we will cast you as a true Nazi patriot and blame the Jews for your assassination. At least your reputation will be salvaged, Herr Fisher." "And what about me, Wolf? Will you kill me as well?" She avoided looking me in the eye, Aubrey. It seems she'd found something to like about me. As she struggled to think of an answer, Fisher took advantage of her distraction. Quick as an adder, he surged from his seat and knocked the gun from her hand. While she scrabbled to retrieve it, he grabbed the manila folder and fled. Wolf rushed after him, screaming curses in German. I ran down the street after them both. Aubrey, dear, I imagine a rainy Sunday morning in Bern is usually a quiet affair. Not so today. The streets were packed with anorak-clad sightseers and racing enthusiasts. Fisher crashed through the crowds like a bowling ball, pursued by a furious Fräulein concealing her gun with her coat. Fisher still had the briefcase, and if I didn't get it back, I was toast. The crowd was like a river, Aubrey, and we were swimming with the current. Fisher was headed to the same place as everyone else in Bern, the Grand Prix. Newspaper. The race is on. Today, the city of Bern is aflame with Grand Prix fever. The race will begin in the early hours of the morning, in what is expected to be wet conditions. Timothy Thithurst of Britain and Ruprecht Chamisso of Germany are the favorites for the top spot, though King of the Mountain, Kurt Fischer, may upset the apple cart once again. circuit starts at Bremengarten, a little town swallowed by the expanding borders of Bern long ago. It had been utterly transformed for the Grand Prix. Swiss flags rippled above crowded stands. Sleek cigar-shaped race cars were lined up at the start line, rain drumming in their hoods. I was in awe of the spectacle. Fischer was fighting off fans and autograph hunters. He shoved his way to his race car, ignoring the rebukes of his team, and jumped into the driver's seat. I charged toward him, ignoring the shouts of the officials. What was my plan, Aubrey? To drag him off from the car and take back my briefcase in front of the whole world? Or to defend him from Wolf? I don't know what I would have done if I'd reached him in time. I never had the chance to find out. The rest of the drivers had already slipped into their cars. The only exception was Cornelio, the Italian driver I'd met at the party, who seemed to still be recovering from the previous night's debauchery. He was sitting mournfully beside his car, his rain-slick hair plastered to his scalp, his head hanging over a bucket. It looked unlikely he'd be able to race. As I approached Fischer's car, a race official grabbed my arm. "Where do you think you're going?" I feigned a swoon. The official's anger turned abruptly to concern. As he tried to catch me, I slipped free and ran for Fischer's car. When Fischer saw me approaching, his eyes widened. I told him that I could help, but I needed him to get out of the car. He gave me a rueful smile. "I enjoyed our time together, Annie," he said. With that, he slammed his foot on the accelerator and roared across the line, drenching me with a skive of tire spray. The crowd gasped. He jumped the gun. Alright, now is coming my least favorite part of the scenario, where I gotta drive a race car, and I believe there's an achievement tied to it. And I have that open. I saw it in my browser, but for some reason it's gone now. Gotta click to the community guides again on Steam. Just a moment. Community. Over the Alps. Guide King of the Mountain. Okay. If he knew he was disqualified, Fischer would have nothing to gain by sticking to the circuit. I expected him to go off track and flee the city. When that happened, I'd need to be right behind him, or I'd lose him for good. I made my way over to the Italian driver's car. He looked up mournfully from his sick bucket. "Mind if I take this for a spin?" He opened his mouth to protest, but when he saw the look in my eyes, he went quiet. Or at least that was my first thought. Then I realized that Wolf was standing behind me, her gun trained on him. "And I'll be joining you," she said. She gestured to the car. "You first." I climbed into the front seat and she slid in behind me. Almost like I'd been put in a plane cockpit, Aubrey. I had no idea what any of the buttons and switches did. I wish I'd read the dossier on the train. I could figure out the accelerator at least. The green flag flew. The ground, a gunshot. Tires squealed, struggling to grip the rain-slick asphalt. We roared from the start line alongside the other cars. The Grand Prix had begun, and I'd found myself taking part. And we were off Aubrey. It was just like racing down the narrow country lanes in Cornwall, except 10 times louder, deadlier, faster. And the Fräulein was brandishing her Mauser as though she fully intended to use it. I told her to stop being silly. But the elephant bellow of the engine ate up my words completely. Wolf was shouting something back at me. Whatever it was, it probably wouldn't have helped. The car was shuddering beneath us, as though every single part of the chassis wanted to fling itself in a different direction. It's not often one ends up accidentally competing in a Grand Prix, Aubrey. If possible, I wanted to win. Fisher was leading the pack and there were only a couple of cars between me and him. I recognized the one right in front of me hogging the road. Timothy Sithurst, the British driver. I dropped back, waiting patiently for an opening. I hung back just enough to anticipate the road ahead. Sure enough, Sithurst's car fishtailed a little around a particularly aggressive rain-slicked turn. A beautiful straight line opened up in front of me. It was like Christmas, Aubrey. I whooped as we surged smoothly ahead. But it wasn't time to celebrate yet, Aubrey. Just one car left between me and Fisher, Ruprecht Chamisso, the odds-on favorite. A sharp turn was coming up. Chamisso had shifted to the far side of the road, leaving an obvious path straight past him. Suspecting a trap, I moved a little to the outside too. After that turn came another, twisting sharply in the opposite direction. I headed straight for the inside line, true as an arrow. It was perfect, Aubrey. I swear, I saw Chamisso's horrified face in my mirror, the very picture of Teutonic outrage. And we got that achievement, thanks to the guide I had open on my mobile phone. What's the next in achievements? Okay. Finally, we were closing in on Fisher. Wolf raced her Mauser. There were several sharp cracks and sparks flew as bullet holes dotted Fisher's car. A bullet hit one of the briefcase clasps. The case, still clutched under his arm, sprang open, banknotes scattered like confetti. He managed to wrestle it shut again, but thousands of francs were dancing like leaves on the wind. I guess I can forget about that achievement of bringing back the briefcase fully loaded. Not sure how I'll look control in the eyes after this one, Aubrey. As Wolf struggled to reload her pistol, Fisher swung around the next bend, a hairpin turn. It was too sharp a turn. My best option was to stick to the outside. I was right. I followed Fisher's line around the sharp bend, and suddenly I was right behind him. We drew level with Fisher. He glanced at us askance, goggles shining, his face twisted in a furious snarl. Wolf readied her gun. At this range she could hardly miss. I slammed my elbow back, hoping to knock the gun from her hands. The gunshot went wide. Wolf juggled the Mauser for a moment, but regained her grip. We went into a terrifying spin while Fisher sped ahead. We crashed squarely into a lamppost. Fortunately, by the time we crashed, we'd lost a great deal of momentum. My skull had been rattled around like a maraca, but I hadn't broken any bones. We watched helplessly as Fisher aimed his car at a barricade and burst through in a shower of splinters. An unsuspecting race marshal on the other side tried to dive out of the way. But Fisher was going too fast. The poor man bounced like a ragged doll. "Are you alright?" I asked the Fräulein. Her hair and mouth were slick with blood. She'd banged her head. "Get us out of here," she mumbled. A police car turned the corner, lights flashing, bells jangling. Losing the police was a moment's work. After all, we were driving a race car. We left them in a cloud of smoke and emasculation. Fisher had taken a road that led straight out of Bern into the surrounding mountains. He was already long gone. "We've lost him," muttered Wolf. "Pull over." She was right. I stopped the car. "Together we can find him, Fräulein Taylor." She tucked her gun away for the first time and stuck out her hand. I shook. A temporary agreement. Strange bedfellows, Aubrey. Behind us, Bern was erupting in a cacophony of ringing bells and wailing sirens. The police would be after us both now. Ahead, the mountains were grand and quiet. The only noise was the distant bellow of Fisher's engine, a taunting echo on the breeze. I raced into the mountains. The pandemonium at the Grand Prix had followed us. The peaceful mountain air was shattered by the noise of shrill whistles and clanging bells behind us. The Polizei were on our tail. A test of precision. I outpaced my pursuers, swerved into a barn full of chickens, and waited in the clucking darkness for them to overtake me. Once they were gone, I pulled out of the barn and continued on my merry way. I raced into the mountains. Dear Aubrey, the rain had finally died down, but dark clouds still threatened overhead. There was only one route Fisher could be following, the long mountain road to Thun. Occasionally we'd spot a Swiss banknote crushed in the mud. The adrenaline from the Grand Prix still burned in my veins. No, this is not what I'm going to do. I attempted small talk with the Fräulein. The intensity of the Grand Prix had left her almost as shaken as I. "The police will burn on our tail," she murmured. We should abandon the race car as soon as possible. The Fräulein agreed. It would be difficult to think of a more impractical car in which to avoid notice. After that, we drove in silence. Our fuel reserves were low. The race car was coughing like a geriatric coal miner. It was no good. We had to stop at Thun. It was a beautiful little sliver of a town, perched between a glittering lake and the backdrop of a storybook mountain. We pulled up outside of a fuel station. A few curious onlookers appeared, keen to investigate the sleek race car that had come roaring into their town. Police report, the police are searching for you. Franks fluttering on the breeze. After the race was cancelled, spectators spilled onto the track and tried to grab as much as they could. We cleared them off. At least it provides a nice breadcrumb trail for us to follow. Strangest day of my career. I need to chase down Kurt Fischer, plus 2 mad women. The race marshals gave me a description of the latter. As for the former, I just need leaf through my collection of Grand Prix magazines. Act 2, end of the road. We're taking a 5-minute break with this scenery. Let's start a timer. See you in 5. Alright, back to the game. We are in... Steam timer actually makes sound amazing. I have to make use of the Steam overlay more often. We are back in Act 2 of the King of the Mountain scenario in over the Alps. And we are in a little town trying to get rid of our race car. The fuel station attendant paused at the pump. He stared at our stolen race car in amazement. Have you come from the Grand Prix? I spun him quite a story, Aubrey. I told him that the Fräulein and I were driving around Switzerland to advertise the Grand Prix. He swallowed the story without question. While we waited, the Fräulein drew me aside. A fisher must have come through Thun, she said. Perhaps someone spotted him? It seemed likely that he'd stopped to refuel. A race car is not terribly fuel efficient after all. With a little quizzing, the fuel attendant told us everything we needed to know. Fischer had indeed stopped here and had mentioned he was headed to Interlaken. Most curious, Aubrey. I was beginning to suspect Fischer had been two-timing me. My next move was obvious. Steal a motorbike. Much lower profile. Wolf watched with admiration while I hot-wired a motorcycle in 20 seconds flat. We sat in the sidecar. Let's go! As we left Thun, we passed the fuel station. A fleet of police cars were parked outside, and the place was crawling with officers. Fortunately, they didn't give us a second glance. I confess, I felt a twinge of regret to leaving the race car behind. My performance in the Grand Prix had been eminently respectable. If I'd been born a man, perhaps I could have had a career on the track. We drove along the edge of a vast, gleaming lake. Thun was behind us. No other cars on the roads. For the first time, we weren't in immediate danger of arrest. The Fräulein and I were long overdue a discussion. If all went to plan, we would soon catch up with Fischer, and I wasn't sure what would happen when we did. How did you know I'd be in Bienne? Even among your Secret Service there are those who are not unsympathetic to the Nazi cause, said Full with a terrible smile. They send us useful tidbits from time to time. I asked her to promise that Fischer wouldn't come to harm. But she wasn't willing to compromise. Fischer is a traitor, she said. I'm so sorry, Fräulein Taylor, but he dies. Step aside when the time comes. I will need to recover the briefcase. Once he's dead, you may retrieve your money, said Fräulein. But his coded documents, the maps he stole from High Command, those are mine. Why haven't you shot me yet? Believe it or not, Fräulein Taylor, I like you, said Wolf. You remind me of myself. He stared at me intently. Why? If you were the one with the gun, would you have shot me? Perhaps, but I would have regretted it. Noted, said the Fräulein. We lapsed into uncomfortable silence. I had much to think about. Somehow I was sure that Fischer would be waiting for us at Interlaken. The Fräulein sat in the sidecar while we sped down to Interlaken. The Fräulein... The Fräulein was sat beside me in the sidecar as we rattled along, her hair streaming. Passing through a small lakeside village, we found ourselves stuck in an inexplicable traffic jam. A test of decency. I clambered off the bike, ignoring the Fräulein's objections, and walked to the front of traffic. Here's Aubrey. We'd been stuck behind a funeral procession. I hopped back on the bike and zoomed off to find another route. We paddled along on the motorcycle, nice and discreet. We passed the road sign. Interlaken, 5 kilometers. Soon we will part ways, Fräulein Taylor. Wolf sounded oddly melancholy at the prospect. I said I'd write her a postcard. If she could tell me the address of her headquarters in Berlin? Wolf laughed. I took the opportunity to remind Wolf that all I wanted was a briefcase. Wolf smiled. Let me take the stone files back to Germany and we won't have a problem. When we arrived in town, it was hard to avoid noticing the seaplane. It stuck out immediately among the quaint little yards. Police report. We asked the young fuel attendant at Thun if he'd seen anything particularly suspicious, but he just mumbled something about glamorous supermodels. Poor boy seemed deluded. It was clear now where we could find Fischer. His race car was parked outside Interlaken's biggest hotel. Wolf strode up to the concierge, carefully applying her smile. We're such fans of Herr Fischer. Which room is he in? I had to admit she was good. He was wrapped around her finger in moments and told her exactly what she wanted to know. We made our way to room 204. I half expected Wolf to burst in, guns blazing, but she paused at the door to eavesdrop. The room's occupants were having an argument. I recognized Fischer's voice, raised in anger. You need me. Without the cipher key, these documents are useless. Comrade Fischer, you do not want to come to Russia. The second voice was male, calm, its accent unplaceable. Switzerland is better for you. Fischer obviously had no idea that his staff was waiting outside his door. Wolf had drawn her Mauser and was briefing quickly. We have a safe house in the forest near Obergoms, said the strangely accented voice. Here, circled on the map. A pause, the glug-glug of some expensive spirit. My spirit is not as expensive, it's just water. But I made the glug-glug nevertheless. Okay. Here's the key. No, take it, I insist. We'll hide you in the mountains until the storm with the British spy blows over. After that, everything happened very quickly, Aubrey. Blind Wolf kicked the door open before I could intervene. I had the briefest glimpse. Kurt Fischer in the armchair, a man in round spectacles sitting opposite him. Then Wolf pointed her gun and shot Fischer directly in the chest. I screamed. Bang! One bullet in the heart, Aubrey. Fischer flopped back into his armchair like a stunned trout. His whiskey soaked the carpet. Death to traitors, said Wolf triumphantly. She turned to me and the Russian spy. Against the wall, both of you. Come on, Fräulein, you got your man. Leave us be. The Soviet spy raised his hands. He was an ordinary-looking chap, wearing a pair of gold-rimmed round spectacles, clutching a manila folder in his hand. Wolf licked her lips, glancing between the two of us. "I will kill the Soviet," she said finally. "Friend Taylor, I tie you up and leave you here." "Could be worse, Aubrey. I held out my wrists obligingly, but then..." Behind Wolf, Fisher's corpse twitched, moved its arm, slowly removed a pair of goggles from its breast pocket. "Lost of words?" asked Wolf, unaware of the pantomime unfolding behind her. Fisher stared at the crackled goggles in befuddled wonder. A bullet was lodged in the lens. She hadn't noticed Aubrey. "What is your name?" asked the Fräulein, pointing her gun at the Russian. "In Switzerland?" Oskar Schocker, the Russian, kept his voice level, staring over her shoulder. Behind her, a miraculously living Fisher slowly raised the paperweight. I warned Wolf at the last moment. Wolf turned and fired a shot, but it went wide. Fisher dropped the paperweight and dashed to the window, leaping out in a cascade of shattered glass. He landed with a sickening crunch below. The Fräulein, the Russian, and I looked at each other. I grabbed for the Fräulein's gun. No luck, Aubrey. She backed away, shouting at me to put my hands where she could see them. Outside, we heard the roar of Fisher's powerful engine. He'd survived the fall somehow, and now he'd escaped our clutches a second time. Wolf, Oskar, and I were left in the hotel room together. 3 spies from 3 countries, collectively outwitted by Fisher. I glanced down at the manila folder in Oskar's hand. Fisher's infamous documents, Aubrey. I was sure of it. Oskar took one look at me, then turned and fled. I heard his footsteps rapidly retreating down the hotel corridor. Wolf barely noticed. She had picked up a map from the table and was examining it, her lips pursed, her eyes dark and angry. Fräulein, I think the Russian has Fisher's documents with him. Her expression changed to pure horror. She charged through the door and down the corridor. I followed. Okay, I think now we gotta start working on the achievement for manipulating the seaplane. Yeah, Annie sabotages Oscar's seaplane. The Fräulein and I followed Oskar down to the lakeside. A motorboat awaited him, with a heavy-set man in a life jacket perched at the wheel. As I rushed down, the boat was already pulling away from the dock. I leapt after the departing vessel. A hell of a jump, Aubrey. Almost didn't make it. I sprawled on the deck and flung myself at the big bald henchman, who was struggling to pull a silent pistol from his belt. Wolf was taking potshots from the dock. Bullets whizzed overhead. As the boat rocked under our shifting weight, I threw myself into the henchman. He overbalanced and went toppling overboard. It was just me and Oskar. I strode forward and grabbed the manila folder from his hands. Thanks for holding them for me, old chap. The Fräulein pulled up alongside us in another boat. I hopped over. We left Oskar struggling to fish his big friend from the water. Good work, Fräulein Taylor. Wolf seemed to have recovered from her disappointment in losing Fisher. We make quite a team. She prodded her mouser just under my chin, her eyes sparkling wickedly. Now hand over the file, if you please. I had no choice but to obey, Aubrey. By the time Wolf and I found ourselves back on shore, a crowd has gathered. We hurried down a quiet alley to escape them. The Fräulein had grabbed Oskar's map from the hotel room. She consulted it now, seeming to assume we would travel there together. I didn't relish the prospect of Wolf's continued company, but before this is over, perhaps I'll have the chance to steal Fisher's documents from her. I guess I messed up the achievement for the seaplane because the seaplane didn't start. We stole Oscar's van from the hotel car park. I assume Oscar had reason to drive the three-wheeler van, but it had trouble climbing uphill. I was halfway up a steep incline, foot jammed on the accelerator, when I realized we weren't moving. A test of calculation. I kept my cool, Aubrey. I cranked the handbrake and, investigating the back of the van, discovered crate after crate of cheap beer. I left them by the roadside and, load lightened, the rest of the journey was much easier. I drove away from Interlaken. The Fräulein sat beside me, chatting a mile a minute, commenting on everything from the weather to the goats. As the hills rolled past, I realized I was rapidly approaching a fork in the road. Fisher was a man on the run. Either he'd gone north to Zurich, hoping to catch the next plane to God knows where, or he drove south to hide out in Oscar Chucker's secret cabin. Fisher was the Bergkönig, the king of the mountain. He wouldn't go north, he'd go south to the treacherous mountain roads, his kingdom. I made a decision, I drove south. Police report. 2 suspects were asking after Kurt Fischer's hotel room number. The concierge seemed oddly love-struck by the German woman, even after we told him she was a dangerous car thief. We had quite a scene waiting for us at the Interlaken hotel. A bullet hole in the wall, a smashed window, and a dozen witnesses who saw Fischer plunge from the 2nd floor. Our suspects, the English woman, the German, apparently embarked on a dramatic lake-crossing chase in pursuit of an unknown party, exchanging gunfire. Half of Interlaken turned out to watch. Sounds exciting, also sounds like a lot of paperwork. No harm in stopping to make sure my guess was correct, Aubrey. But Wolf stayed behind while I popped into the hotel lobby. Concierge looked me up and down, unimpressed. I ignored him and spoke to the hotel guests instead. An old woman with hawkish features drew me aside, clutching her handbag like a shield. "I overheard you talking about a race car," she murmured. "The man who drove it, that was Kurt Fischer, was it not? The Bergkönig." "Yes, what of it?" "I thought I recognized him. He was in here earlier today. Had plenty of cash in his briefcase. Bought drinks for the whole bar. All smiles." The old woman shook her head. "I heard all about what happened on the radio. That poor Marshal. His poor wife. Fischer needs to face justice." I am sure he'll get what's coming to him. My tone seemed to alarm her. "I don't believe in vigilante justice," she said. The rest of the guests proved much less talkative. I'd been right, Fischer was heading south. Chat later, Aubrey. Onward. Grimsel Pass. We hit the road. Grimsel Pass' fearsome reputation was well earned. It was a treacherous stretch of road. I came up to a bend far too fast and realized I was about to go careening into the abyss. A test of courage. No choice, Aubrey, but to commit to it. I leaned hard into the turn and skidded around the bend like an Olympian in a bobsleigh. My wheel missed the perilous drop by a whisker. After that, I slowed down. Grimsel Pass was a devilish little road, Aubrey, winding like a snake in the Sahara. As we navigated the treacherous mountain curves, the sun dipped on the horizon. Soon it would be too dark to drive. I found myself whistling cheerfully. It was a beautiful afternoon. I was hoping that the worst of the day was behind us. It wasn't. "Stop!" shouted the Fräulein. "Look down the slope!" I pulled over. Grimsel Pass was an impossible and magnificent road. No driver could have hoped to conquer it at speed, and evidently one hadn't. A smoking wreck lay below one of the formidable hairpin turns. Crumbled blue metal, mangled tires. It was unmistakable, the twisted remnants of Fisher's car. Police report. Removed one stamp. Added one stamp. An old woman bustled up to us admiring and eager to tell us about Fisher and the woman chasing after him. Apparently both had headed off in the direction of Grimsel Pass. Don't fancy their chances on those roads. Boom! Killed by his own hubris, said Wolf, peering out over the edge. On the road too. How fitting. Shame for it to end like this. A sad little wreck on a lonely mountainside. Somehow I had hoped the story would have a grander conclusion. I told Wolf to wait on the road while I climbed down to take a look. I half slid, half clambered down. By the time I reached the bottom, my hands were black with mud. Waving away smoke, I approached the crushed car. I searched the footwell. Someone had weighed down the accelerator with a brick. A trap, Aubrey. I caught a glint out of the corner of my eye. Looking up, I saw a silhouette figure at the top of the slope, holding something long and bulky. Then I saw the glint again. Sunlight catching a scope. A rifle! Aimed straight at me. Where was the Fräulein? I'd left her up there. Stop right there, shouted the silhouette. A deep voice, but young. Don't move, or I'll shoot. He spoke German with a distinctly Swiss flavor. A local. I did the bewildered damsel routine. There's been a terrible crash. You need to come down here and help me. To my relief, my new acquaintance slung his rifle over his shoulder. Just come quietly, alright? I'm taking you to the police station. He came sliding down the slope, no longer silhouetted against the afternoon sun. I could see that he was a big lad in his early 20s, heavy-set, gap-toothed, practical clothes. Not a drop of malice in his eyes, Aubrey. Big man, but he looked the type to break up fights rather than start them. "Oh," he said, coming to a stop a dozen yards uphill. "I'm Rolf." "I'm Manny Taylor, adventurer, spy, and bon vivant. Care to explain the gun?" He stared at me in utter confusion. Hey, Fisher told me not to shoot you, just to hold you at gunpoint and take you to the police station. Apparently you're on the run from the law? I had to think quickly, Aubrey. I'm on the run, I admitted, but so is Fisher. I don't want trouble with the law. Rolf stuck out his yaw stubbornly. I should take you straight to the police. But Rolf, you took money from Fisher. That makes you an accessory. He stared at me, eyes wide and scared. So, I'm a criminal too? Good news, Rolf. Stick with me and you won't have to go to jail. I started walking up the slope. He followed like a scared little boy. I'd appreciate a bed for the night, Rolf. Wait! It was a Fräulein. She'd hidden in a tangle of roadside bush. Now she emerged, brushing burrs from her jacket. I never doubted you for a minute, Fräulein Taylor, she said. Rolf, Wolf, Wolf, Rolf. Quite a tongue twister. The Fräulein grabbed Rolf's hand and whispered something in his ear. I sighed. Had to be wrapped up around her little finger by nightfall. As we approached Rolf's truck, a big furry shape bounded from the passenger seat. It jumped up and slobbered lovingly all over my coat. Down, Marty! Shouted Rolf. Sorry about him. The Fräulein shouted, awful creature. I pet the dog. It whined in pleasure and nuzzled my hand. I'll drive, I said chirpily, climbing behind the wheel of Wolf's truck. He opened his mouth as though to object and then slumped in defeat. That's fine, he said. As I put the truck into gear, Marty laid his head lovingly on my lap. I'd made at least one friend in Switzerland, Aubrey. Rolf's truck smelled of wet dog and whiskey. The truck rattled down the road. Marty stuck his head out of the window, tongue flapping. Wolf sat in the back seat, gazing at the beautiful vista with a bored grimace. Rolf's attempts to make conversation were limited to occasional remarks about a passing bird. So, Fisher crashed his own car? Rolf nodded, said he needed to get rid of it. I asked if Fisher had found another vehicle, but Rolf just shrugged. As darkness fell, I focused on the road ahead. By the time we pulled up outside Rolf's lodge, night had fallen. The truck's headlights cut a pale arc through the fathomless darkness of the Swiss countryside. Marty lay on Rolf's lap, dozing fitfully. Wake up, boy, murmured Rolf, giving his dog a scratch behind the ears. We're here. About time, murmured the Fräulein. Newspaper. Chaos at Grand Prix. Fisher on the run. The Swiss Grand Prix was left in shambles after a pair of gun-wielding women stole a race car from Italian millionaire Cornelio Fanucci. Fanucci has claimed that he met one of the thieves at the pre-Grand Prix party and has accused his competitors of sending them to sabotage his chances. Although the race was ultimately won by Bookie's favorite Ruprecht Chamisso, this achievement was overshadowed by the antics of his notorious countryman Kurt Fischer, who jumped the gun and was disqualified. As he exited the circuit, Fischer knocked over a marshal who passed away at the scene. Police have issued a warrant for Fischer's arrest. Rolf's lodge was a sturdy wooden building with a pair of antlers above the door. Inside, the place was crammed with ghastly hunting trophies. The drinks cabinet was groaning under the weight of its cargo. With Rolf's permission, I poured myself a little brandy. The other two followed suit. I rubbed Marty's belly and gave him treats. He was a particularly well-tempered specimen, Aubrey. He begged and smiled and turned in excited circles. I turned on the radio. Jazz, for the first time all day. I relaxed. Ignoring social niceties, I leaned to Rolf's spare bed and collapsed. Ah man, I think I messed up another achievement. Was supposed to win a drinking contest? Yeah, Annie beat Rolf and the Fallen in a drinking contest, but we didn't start a drinking contest. Ah, shame. Ignoring social niceties, I leaned to Rolf's spare bed and collapsed. A dragon's sword could not have tempted me out of that nice warm bed. Dawn now, Aubrey. Endless rain is hammering down outside. As I write, Rolf is snoring loud enough to shake the floor. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here lost in thought. Had a horrible dream. The child eater statue from Kornhausplatz had come to life and was stalking me across a silent, empty Paris. He was holding fistfuls of screaming children in each hand. By the weird logic of dreams, I knew it was my fault the statue had come to life in the first place. I offered myself up for sacrifice, but it ate the children and left me alone in the empty city. I woke with a knot of tremendous guilt in my stomach. I don't even know why I'm telling you this, Aubrey. Forget it. I can already hear the Fräulein downstairs singing some German folk song. It's time to go. We piled into Rolf's truck. We drove as far as the truck would take us. When we reached the forested lower slopes of the Seelhorn, we climbed out and hiked. Rolf lent me a raincoat. We walked, hunched against the downpour, boots squelching in the sudden ground. Dark clouds swirled around distant peaks. Marty ran circles around us. Rolf proved to be excellent at imitating birdsong. I strolled beside him as he cawed, cheeped and chirped at the top of his lungs. It sounded ridiculous, but the trees sung back. At least we reached it, a delightful little cabin hidden amongst the trees. The door was locked. No smoke from the chimney. The Fräulein banged on the door. "Herr Fischer, open up!" But there was no answer. Oh, I didn't mean to click. Wolf shut out the lock with obvious glee. The gunshot echoed around the woods, momentarily silencing all birdsong, and the door swung open. The cabin was freezing cold, and the furniture was buried under a solid inch of dust. No one had been here for a year or more, Aubrey. Had Fischer fooled us all? Had he doubled back from Grimsel Pass and gone to Zurich Airport? Was he enjoying a cigarette in first class while we blundered around the woods? These were the thoughts that ran through my head, Aubrey. The Fräulein was opening cupboards as though she expected Fischer to be hiding among the brooms. "He should be here by now," she muttered. "I'll go chop wood for the fire," said Rolf, taking a hatchet from the wall. We settled down to wait for Fischer to arrive. The hours trickled past. The rain didn't let up. We waited all day in that cabin, Aubrey. No sign of Fisher. We need to get going, said Rolf eventually. He was sat by the crackling fireplace, warming his hands. It's getting dark. No, snapped the Fräulein. We'll wait here all night if we have to. Give it up, Fräulein. Fisher bamboozled us. A small part of me was glad that Fisher had got away, despite everything he'd done. We will wait until nightfall, the Fräulein insisted. Once the rain let up, I wandered outside to look at the stars. It was peaceful, Aubrey. Trees whistled in the wind. Owls hooted. Somewhere a wolf howled at the moon. Then I spotted something. A thin spiral of smoke rising over the woods. I headed back into the cabin and told them what I'd seen. Probably just another hunter, said Rolf, but the Fräulein already leapt up from her chair and was out the door. With a sigh, I followed. Marty rushed ahead, nose to the ground. We followed closely as Marty crashed through the undergrowth. The trees petered out. Marty bounded up to the edge of a steep incline and barked furiously into the darkness. Rolf, the Fräulein and I peered down the slope. At the bottom was a dwindling flicker of flame, tended by a huddled silhouette. It had to be him. Guten Tag, Herr Fischer. My words echoed around the surrounding trees. Marty stopped barking and began a rumbling growl. The figure by the fire stood up and turned to face us. There he was, Aubrey, his face half lit, the king of the mountain. Kurt Fisher attempted a grin. It had none of its usual gleaming charm. "Hello, Annie," he said. He looked a little worse for wear. Shivering, rain-soaked, clothes tattered, dark circles under his eyes. What the hell happened to you? Got lost? Fisher glared up, as though daring me to say something about that. Haven't been able to sleep either. There's wolves in these woods. One eye twitched. Been stalking me since yesterday. Long, lithe shapes moved in the darkness beyond the trees. Eyes glimmered in firelight. Wolf pulled the rifle from his back, warily eyeing the shadows. Marty's growls grew louder. Wolf withdrew the Mauser from her bow. What were you thinking, Kurt? His head slumped. He didn't answer. No map, no supplies. No wonder he'd ended up here, freezing to death while the wolves prowled. A touching reunion, said the Fräulein, pressing her mother to the back of Rolf's head. Sorry to bring it to such a sudden end. Rolf, give me the rifle and your ammunition belt. You better listen to her, Rolf. Thank you, Fräulein Taylor, said the Fräulein. The voice of reason, as always. Aubrey, I honestly believe she thought I was on her side. Rolf surrendered his rifle with a sigh. She unloaded the clip, counted the number of bullets, then pocketed them. With a menacing smile, she dropped the gun into the mud. "Stay here," she said. "Don't make me kill you, Fräulein Taylor." She descended to the slope, her Mauser at the ready. Fisher stared at his approaching executioner with tears in his eyes. But the Fräulein had miscalculated Aubrey. She was used to her German guns, with 5 bullets in the clip. But Rolf's rifle wasn't a Mauser. It was a Swiss K-31 with 6 bullets total, and one of them was still resting in the chamber. I picked it up, checked the chamber to confirm my suspicions. Wolf had left me 1 bullet. Time to make it count. By this time she had reached Fisher. "On your knees," she said dispassionately. He obeyed, eyes hollow. "Any last words, Herr Fisher?" "Tell them I died at Grimsel Pass," he said, "on the road. I took aim, found myself wishing the rifle had some kind of telescopic sight. I'm a good shot, Aubrey, but it was a tricky angle." I don't know what I did last time, and I'm not sure what I want to do this time. No warning. I took the shot. If I missed, I was dead. Obviously, it would be terrible if I missed. Unthinkable. Well, it happened. I missed. Sort of. Don't judge me, Aubrey. I've spent the last 6 months wooing diplomats and drinking cocktails. I'm out of practice. Also, I told you it was a tricky angle. So, when I shot, I was aiming for the Fräulein's head. My bullet went right through her thigh. Tricky angle, Aubrey. She screamed and her hand jolted. The gun fired, taking off one of Fisher's ears in messy and unpleasant fashion. With a roar of pain, Fisher lunged for the gun. The 2 of them struggled, the Mauser wavering between them. One moment pointed at Fisher, the next pointed at Wolf. It was quite a pitiful spectacle, Aubrey. 2 small figures scrabbling about in the dark, grunting wordlessly at each other, both bleeding copiously, one from her leg, one from the place his ear used to be. All I could do was watch. Finally, they toppled over into the dwindling campfire. Burning wood scattered, smoke billowed. The fire went out. In the sudden darkness, I had only a vague impression of what happened next. Long, black bodies closing in, glowing eyes, snapping teeth, Wolf retreating into the trees. Firing her gun and dragging her wounded leg behind her, screams as Fisher was dragged away. The Mauser fired again and again, the muzzle flash momentarily lighting up a scene of carnage. Wolf and I just waited for it to be over. Eventually, the snarling stopped, the wolves moved on. The forest was quiet again. I broke the silence. "Let's go home," I told Rolf. Wait, no, actually, we descended to the campsite to investigate. Horrible, Aubrey. All we found was blood, and one of Fisher's boots, with a foot still inside. Neither of them could have survived, I was sure of it. It hardly seemed important, but we recovered my briefcase. There wasn't much money left, mind you. Fisher must have been desperate. He'd been using the notes for kindling. About half of it was gone. Control wasn't going to be happy. But I was still seized by profound horror, and I couldn't bring myself to care. "Let's go home," I told Rolf. He nodded, his eyes haunted. We traipsed back to the truck in silence, Marty trotting behind us with his tail between his legs. Rolf drove me back to his hunting lodge. Newspaper. Hunt for Fisher continues. After his dramatic exit from Sunday's Grand Prix race in Bern, in which a marshal was run over and killed, Kurt Fisher remains unaccounted for. He was last seen in a hotel in Meiringen in conversation with an unidentified hunter. Police have not yet issued a statement, despite widespread speculation that something terrible has happened to one of motorsport's most colorful characters. I woke with a start as we pulled up outside Rolf's lodge. The moon had turned the world silver. Rolf had been utterly traumatized by the carnage in the woods. He sat silently in the corner, knocking back whiskey and cuddling Marty fiercely. Honestly, how could a hunter be rattled by just a little blood? Of all people, Rolf should have understood nature, red in tooth and claw. I went to bed, leaving him to stew. It was a beautiful morning. For once, not a cloud in the sky. I was putting my boots on when Rolf woke up. "Where are you going?" he asked, looking hurt. "I have an appointment in Zurich," I told him. It was true. My handler would be waiting for me. "I'll send you a postcard." I gave Marty a last pet, laughing as he licked my face. Then I was out the door, and I didn't look back. Fish are missing. Feared dead. Kurt Fischer's race car has been found wrecked near Grimsel Pass, one of the Swiss Alps' most treacherous roads. Could the king of the mountain have perished on one of the very hairpin bends he has conquered so many times before? This is what the police have implied in their latest press conference. Despite the lack of a body, the police chief has said he's ready to close the case, calling it a tragic affair and inevitable, given Fischer's reckless driving style. Dearest Aubrey, been quite a journey, hasn't it? My trip up to Zurich yesterday was uncharacteristically peaceful. This morning I left my hotel with a spring in my step. As expected, my handler was waiting for me in Café Zermatt. He surveyed me coolly through the cigarette smoke and gestured to the seat opposite him. Some good news at least. The Polizei are entirely focused on Fischer. No mention of you in their reports. A smoky pause. Explain yourself. Fischer wasn't a viable asset, but he'd stolen top-secret documents. My handler stroked his mustache. I see. And do you have these documents? The documents were lost. My handler shook his head, disappointment evident on his face. And what about the money? The Frenchman stubbed out his cigarette forcefully. I placed the briefcase on the table. Since we couldn't use it to turn Fischer into an asset, I assume it's all present and correct. I had 33,000 Swiss francs left, Aubrey. I paused. There's less than half left. The Frenchman's eyes bulged. What the hell happened? Did you decide to buy some magic beans? Fischer happened, I said. I explained his desperate little campfire. My handler shook his head. This isn't going to go over well with control. He took the briefcase and slid it under his chair. What now? I asked. He lit another cigarette. The man was a chimney. What a debacle, the Frenchman sighed. We lost a great deal for absolutely no benefit. This is a blemish on your record, Mademoiselle Taylor. He drummed his fingers. I expect Control will send you back to Paris. You can continue your work there indefinitely. Exactly what I thought I wanted, Aubrey. But a part of me felt disappointed. I returned to the hotel. It was a crisp summer day. I took the long route back to the hotel, enjoying the sunlight. I fell back onto the bed, thinking about the week I'd had and the weeks ahead. Paris beckoned, delightful, safe, familiar Paris. My social circle would have noticed my absence. There would be painful conversations ahead, much charming and mingling required. I thought about Fisher and the Fräulein devoured together in the Seelhorn forest. I thought about the child eater rampaging through my dreams. I came to a decision. I've started preparing for my return to Paris. I'm nothing if not devoted to my duty. Control should give me a pay rise. If I can't possibly do something to help prevent the storm that's on the horizon, well, maybe I should. Goodbye, Aubrey. I doubt I can maintain this postcard business. Not where I'm going. If I ever make it back to Blightly, you owe me a drink. And this has been Over the Alps, the second storyline, King of the Hill. Thanks for following along. I was hoping I would get much more of the achievements, but I failed. I failed so many. And some I didn't even know where I failed them. I'll give this another replay, but probably off stream, because I can't stream the same stories 3 times in a row. Yeah, maybe I'll try a achievement playthrough of the other storyline next time around. Waiting for the there's always like some sort of coded message at the end of the credits. And I haven't deciphered it yet. How was your foot, Eric? Food. No, not foot. But if something's wrong with your foot, you can tell me about that too. I'm glad your food is okay. I'm very conscious about my hard and soft consonants ever since Heiko pointed out that I speak out everything the hard way. But apparently food is still a problem for me. Should be the hidden message soon. There we go. I have no idea. I wonder if this is some Rod 13 or something? Yeah, it must be. I took screenshots of it and I will try to decipher and compare it with the other messages if they're different in the Discord. Alright, that's it for today's stream. Thanks for watching and see you on Thursday. Bye bye.